In the vastness of space, aboard the colossal orbital station Ecliptica Prime, the Galactic Council met in an atmosphere thick with tension. The Council was a coalition of over 1,000 species, each with its own culture, language, and agenda. For centuries, it had been the center of galactic diplomacy, where disputes were settled, resources shared, and alliances forged. But now, chaos threatened to tear it apart. At the heart of this turmoil stood humanity, a young, ambitious species that had joined the Council only decades ago. Unlike other members who valued patience and compromise, humans acted quickly, often without consulting others. They expanded their colonies rapidly, mined resources aggressively, and refused to bow to pressure from older, more established species. To many Council members, humanity's behavior seemed reckless and arrogant. Inside the Grand Chamber, delegates sat in rows of floating platforms arranged in a spiral around a glowing central dais. Ambassador Cal Armitage, Earth's representative, sat quietly at the center of the storm. His sharp eyes scanned the room as voices rose in anger. Alien leaders pointed bony fingers or waved tentacles in outrage, accusing humanity of disrupting the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. "This cannot continue," shouted Counselor Serene, a tall, silver-skinned being with shimmering scales. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "Your refusal to negotiate is destabilizing the Council. We demand answers, Ambassador Armitage." Cale leaned forward slightly but said nothing. He knew better than to respond immediately. Humanity's actions weren't born out of malice. They were driven by necessity. Back on Earth, resources were dwindling, and billions depended on the success of human colonies for survival. Negotiating meant delays. Delays humanity couldn't afford. Counselor Vorthak, a hulking insectoid creature with jagged mandibles, chimed in next. "You claim your expansion benefits all, yet we see only destruction. Your mining operations have polluted entire star systems. You must be held accountable." The accusations continued, one after another, until the chamber felt like it might burst into chaos. Some species called for sanctions against Earth, while others demanded immediate withdrawal of human forces from disputed territories. Amidst the shouting, Cale remained calm. His face betrayed no emotion, though his mind raced with thoughts of how to respond. Finally, when the noise reached a fever pitch, Cale stood up. The movement silenced the room instantly. Every eye turned to him. Even those who despised humanity couldn't deny the commanding presence he exuded. "Negotiation," Cale began, his deep voice cutting through the air like a blade, "is futile when survival is non-negotiable." His words sent ripples through the chamber. Murmurs broke out again, some curious, others furious. What did he mean? Was humanity truly facing extinction? Or was this just another excuse to justify their defiance? Before anyone could press further, Cale sat back down, leaving the question hanging unanswered. Around him, the Council descended once more into heated debate. But Cale wasn't worried. He had planted a seed of doubt, one that would grow in the coming days. As the session ended and delegates filed out, Cale stayed behind, staring at the glowing dais. He knew humanity's future depended not on bending to the will of others, but on standing firm. And if that meant refusing to negotiate, so be it. Still, as he left the chamber, Cale couldn't shake the feeling that the Council's problems ran deeper than anyone realized, and that humanity might not be the only ones hiding secrets. Back on Earth, Ambassador Cal Armitage faced a different kind of storm. The Council's accusations had traveled faster than light, sparking heated debates across the planet. News outlets buzzed with conflicting opinions. Some argued that humanity should bow to pressure and negotiate. Others insisted they fight for their rights. The divide between these factions grew wider by the day. Cale stood in his office, staring out at the sprawling cityscape of New Geneva, Earth's capital. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Despite the beauty outside, his mind was clouded with worry. Humanity's future hung in the balance, and every decision he made could tip the scales, for better or worse. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Lila Voss entered, carrying a tablet filled with data. Lila was one of Kel's closest allies, a brilliant xenobiologist turned strategist who understood both science and politics. Her sharp mind and unwavering loyalty had been invaluable during humanity's time in the Galactic Council. "Kale," she said, placing the tablet on his desk, "we have a problem." Kale turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" Leela hesitated before speaking. "I've been analyzing reports from our colonies. There's evidence suggesting sabotage, deliberate attacks disguised as accidents, asteroid collisions, rogue AI incidents, all timed suspiciously close to council deliberations." Kale frowned. "Are you saying someone is targeting us?" "Not just someone," Layla replied grimly. "Certain council members are behind this. I've traced patterns linking these events to key votes where humanity opposed their interests." She tapped the tablet, pulling up holographic charts and graphs. Each piece of evidence pointed to a disturbing conclusion. Humanity wasn't facing random setbacks, but coordinated efforts to weaken them. Someone within the council wanted Earth to fail, and they weren't shy about hiding it anymore. Kale clenched his fists. "Do we have proof? Hard evidence we can present to the council?" Leela shook her head. "Not yet, but there's something else." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There's a shadowy faction operating within the council, the Veil Syndicate. They manipulate galactic politics for their gain. If my suspicions are correct, they're orchestrating these attacks." The room fell silent as Kale absorbed this revelation. The Veil Syndicate wasn't new. It had been whispered about in hushed tones for years, but no one had ever proven its existence. If Leela was right, humanity's defiance wasn't just about survival. It was about resisting a hidden enemy pulling strings from the shadows. "What do you suggest?" Kale asked finally. "We investigate," Leela said firmly. "We need to gather irrefutable evidence. Without it, we risk alienating potential allies and giving the council more ammunition against us." Kale nodded slowly. He trusted Layla's judgment, but the risks were enormous. Investigating meant stepping into dangerous territory controlled by beings far older and more powerful than humans. Yet doing nothing was equally perilous. As if reading his thoughts, Leela added, "We don't have to do this alone. There are factions within the council who oppose the syndicate. If we play our cards right, we might find allies among them." Kale sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And if we're wrong, then we lose everything," Leela admitted bluntly. "But if we're right, we expose the truth, and maybe save not just humanity, but the entire galaxy." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, oblivious to the weight of the decisions being made inside that room. Finally, Kale straightened, his resolve hardening. "Start preparing," he said. "We'll need a team, resources, and a plan. This won't be easy, but we have no choice." Layla gave him a small, determined smile. When has anything worth fighting for ever been easy? As she left the room, Kale returned to the window, gazing at the distant stars. Somewhere out there lay answers and dangers that would test humanity's strength and courage. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: humanity wouldn't back down without a fight. The starship Eclipse, a sleek human vessel equipped with cutting-edge stealth technology, drifted silently through the darkness of space. Its destination was New Elysium, a remote colony located on the edge of human-controlled territory. Once thriving with life and industry, the colony had suddenly gone dark weeks ago. Communication attempts had failed, and reconnaissance drones sent to investigate returned with fragmented data, disturbing images of empty streets and eerie silence. Ambassador Kale Armitage stood on the bridge alongside Dr. Leela Voss, both clad in simple gray uniforms that marked them as part of Earth's diplomatic corps. They weren't soldiers, but circumstances had forced them into roles far beyond their usual duties. Accompanying them were two members of the ship's crew. Captain Ria Torres, a seasoned pilot with nerves of steel, and Engineer Jonas Vale, a tech genius whose quick thinking often saved missions from disaster. As the eclipse approached New Elysium, the team reviewed what little intel they had. Holographic projections showed the colony's layout, a sprawling network of domes connected by transparent tunnels, designed to withstand harsh extraterrestrial environments. Everything appeared intact, yet something felt off. "We're here," Captain Torres announced, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The ship settled into orbit above the planet, its systems scanning for any signs of danger. No active power sources detected. No life readings. Kale exchanged a glance with Lila. This wasn't just an abandoned outpost. It was a ghost town. "Let's move," Kale said firmly. "But stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into." The team boarded a smaller shuttlecraft and descended to the surface. As they landed near the central dome, the sight before them sent chills down their spines. The colony looked frozen in time. Doors left ajar, tools scattered as if workers had vanished mid-task. There were no bodies, no wreckage, just an unsettling emptiness. "This doesn't make sense," Leela murmured, stepping cautiously onto the dusty ground. She scanned the area with a handheld device, searching for clues. If this was an attack, why leave everything behind? Jonas knelt beside a damaged console embedded in the wall. His fingers danced over the controls as he attempted to revive it. After a few tense moments, the screen flickered to life, displaying erratic energy signatures. "These patterns, they're not natural," he said, frowning. Someone, or something, overloaded the system. Suddenly, the console emitted a sharp beep. Red lights flashed around them, and a low hum filled the air. Before anyone could react, tiny metallic objects swarmed out of vents and crevices, nanobots programmed to eliminate intruders. "Move," Kale shouted, grabbing Lila's arm and pulling her toward the shuttle. The team sprinted back, dodging streams of nanobots that disintegrated anything they touched. Jonas tripped but was yanked up by Captain Torres, who shoved him ahead while firing bursts of electromagnetic pulses to slow the swarm. Inside the shuttle, Jonas frantically worked to override the launch sequence. "Hold on," he yelled as the engines roared to life. The shuttle lifted off just as the nanobots reached its hull, leaving trails of sparks in their wake. Once safely aboard the Eclipse, the team caught their breath. Despite the chaos, they'd managed to retrieve partial data from the console. Lila immediately began analyzing it, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What did we find?" Kale asked, still catching his breath. Leela hesitated, then turned to face him. "It's encrypted, but one thing is clear. Whoever attacked New Elysium used advanced technology far beyond anything cataloged by the Council, or even by us. And there are traces of experiments." Cal's jaw tightened. Experiments. On humans. The implications were horrifying. Whatever the Council, or the mysterious Vale Syndicate, was hiding, it went deeper than sabotage. It was personal. As the Eclipse sped away from New Elysium, Kale stared at the fading image of the colony on the view screen. One thought echoed in his mind. Humanity wasn't just fighting for resources or territory anymore. They were fighting for survival and the truth. Back aboard Ecliptica Prime, the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with anticipation as Ambassador Cal Armitage prepared to address the delegates. The data recovered from New Elysium had been decrypted enough to reveal fragments of a sinister plot, evidence that certain council members were directly involved in sabotaging human colonies. It was time to confront them head-on. Kale stood at the glowing central dais, his posture rigid but calm. Around him, alien leaders murmured among themselves, some curious, others hostile. He could feel their eyes boring into him, waiting for his next move. Taking a deep breath, he activated the holographic projector embedded in the podium. "This," Kale began, his voice steady and commanding, "is proof of your betrayal." The chamber fell silent as images and data streams filled the air above the dais. Maps showed patterns of sabotage aligning perfectly with council votes against humanity. Energy signatures matched advanced technology, not publicly available, even within the council. Most damning of all were intercepted communications implicating several high-ranking members in covert operations targeting Earth's colonies. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some delegates leaned forward, shocked by the revelations. Others exchanged nervous glances, clearly uneasy about being implicated. Councillor Serene, her silver scales shimmering under the chamber lights, rose to her feet. "Ambassador Armitage," she said coolly, though her tone betrayed hints of unease, "you accuse us without evidence. These interpretations can be fabricated." Kale didn't flinch. "Then explain why every colony attacked matches these coordinates, or how nanobot swarms, technology classified even to many of you, were found dismantling our infrastructure." Serene hesitated, her composure slipping slightly before she regained control. "Even if this is true," she countered, "it does not justify humanity's refusal to negotiate. Your defiance disrupts galactic stability." Her words sparked outrage among other delegates. Some shouted accusations at Kal, while others demanded answers from Serene and her allies. The chamber descended into chaos, voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger and confusion. But amidst the noise, cracks began forming in the council's unity. A Zanari delegate named Threx, a towering insectoid creature with iridescent wings, spoke up. "We have long suspected corruption within our ranks," he said, his voice resonating like a low hum. "If Ambassador Armitage speaks the truth, we must investigate, not dismiss." Threx's statement shifted the mood. Other species nodded in agreement, particularly those who had previously suffered under the Council's unequal policies. For the first time, Kale saw flickers of doubt spreading among the delegates. However, not everyone was convinced. Councillor Vorthak, the hulking insectoid leader, slammed his clawed hands on his platform. "This is nonsense," he bellowed. "Humanity seeks to divide us further with baseless claims." As arguments erupted once more, Kale noticed subtle movements among certain delegates, furtive glances, whispered exchanges. It confirmed what Leela had warned him about. Factions within the council were already maneuvering behind the scenes. The Veil Syndicate wasn't just pulling strings, it was fracturing alliances faster than anyone anticipated. Back on Earth, news of Kal's presentation spread rapidly. While some praised his bravery, others criticized his tactics. Within the United Earth Senate, debates raged over whether confronting the council so boldly was wise. Senator Mara Holt, a vocal opponent of Kal's leadership, publicly questioned his motives. "Is this truly about justice?" she asked during a televised address. "Or is Ambassador Armitage pursuing personal glory at the cost of peace?" The pressure mounted, both externally and internally. Late one night, Kal received an encrypted message on his private terminal. The sender was anonymous, but the message sent chills down his spine. "Your silence will ensure your survival." Kal stared at the screen, his mind racing. Was this a threat or a warning? Whoever it was knew too much, and they wanted humanity to back down. As he sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars, Kal realized the stakes were higher than ever. Humanity couldn't trust the Council, but neither could they stand alone against its shadowy forces. One thing was clear: betrayal ran deeper than anyone imagined, and uncovering the truth would require sacrifices no one was prepared to make. The encrypted message haunted Kal as he prepared for his next move. The Council was fractured, but humanity still stood isolated. If they were to survive and expose the truth, they needed allies. But who could they trust in a galaxy rife with secrets and betrayal? Kal turned to an unlikely source: the Orcs, a nomadic species dismissed by most as scavengers. The Orcs traveled the galaxy in massive, patchwork ships, salvaging relics from ancient civilizations. While many saw them as little more than opportunists, Kal knew better. During his early days as ambassador, he had formed a quiet alliance with the Orcs elder Zithar, a wiry being with glowing blue eyes and skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Sci-Fi's people possessed unparalleled knowledge of forgotten technologies, and their motives were often misunderstood. Leela accompanied Kel aboard the Eclipse as it approached the Orcs fleet. Their flagship, the Driftspire, loomed in the void, a colossal structure cobbled together from pieces of derelict vessels, asteroids, and alien artifacts. It looked chaotic, yet there was a strange beauty to its asymmetry. As they docked, Kel and Leela were greeted by Zethar himself. "Ambassador," the elder said, his voice soft but resonant, "you come seeking answers once again." "We need your help," Kel admitted without preamble. "What we found on New Elysium, the energy signatures, the nanobots, it matches nothing we've seen before. We believe it ties back to something hidden within the Council." Zethar tilted his head, considering. "You speak of things best left buried," he said cryptically. "But I sense urgency in you. Show me what you have." Inside the Driftspire, the team shared the decrypted data with Zethar. As he studied the holographic projections, his expression grew grave. Finally, he spoke. "These patterns, they resemble fragments of the Genesis Protocol, a project abandoned long ago by the Council, or so we believed." "The Genesis Protocol?" Leela asked, her curiosity piqued. Zethar nodded. "A failed experiment to create super-sentient beings capable of uniting the galaxy. It was deemed too dangerous, its failures catastrophic, yet traces remain scattered across the stars, guarded or forgotten." Kel's mind raced. Could this be what the Veil Syndicate sought to reactivate? And if so, why target humanity? Before Kel could press further, Zethar added, "If the Syndicate revives the protocol, it will unleash forces beyond control. You must stop them, but beware. They are not alone." In exchange for their assistance, the Orcs agreed to lend stolen cloaking technology and provide safe passage through hostile territories. Zethar also offered one final piece of advice. "Seek out the Zenari rogue Threx. He despises the Council's corruption and may aid you, if you prove worthy." With renewed purpose, Kel and Leela set course for Zenari space. Along the way, they reviewed everything they'd learned. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were uncovering a conspiracy that threatened the entire galaxy. When they reached Threx's location, an asteroid hideout deep in uncharted space, they found him surrounded by other defectors and rebels. The towering insectoid leader listened intently as Kel laid out their case. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, Threx spoke. "You ask much of us, human. To side with you is to declare war on the Council. And doing nothing ensures destruction for all," Kel countered. "We can't fight this alone." Threx studied him, then nodded slowly. "Very well. We will join you, but only because the alternative is worse." As the unlikely alliance solidified, Kel felt a spark of hope. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. Together, they might stand a chance against the shadows threatening to consume the galaxy. Yet even as plans were made, Kel couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, and the hardest battles lay ahead. With their fragile alliance in place, Kel and his team turned their attention to the Genesis Protocol. The more they uncovered about it, the clearer it became that this ancient project was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Zythar's warnings echoed in Kel's mind. If the Veil Syndicate succeeded in reactivating the protocol, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy. Dr. Lila Voss worked tirelessly aboard the Eclipse, piecing together fragments of data recovered from New Elysium and cross-referencing them with information provided by the Orcs. Late one night, as the ship drifted through the void, she finally made a breakthrough. "Kel," she called out, her voice trembling with urgency. He entered the dimly lit lab, where holographic projections floated around her like ghostly shades. "I think I understand what the Genesis Protocol was designed to do." She pointed to a series of diagrams showing neural networks connected to organic structures. It wasn't just about creating super-sentient beings. It was about merging consciousness, taking individuals and fusing their minds into a single, hive-like entity. The council thought it would bring unity, but instead, it caused chaos. Kale frowned. Chaos? How? Leela hesitated before continuing. The merged entities became unstable. They lost individuality, free will, and in some cases, sanity. Entire civilizations were consumed, their populations reduced to mindless drones serving an uncontrollable force. That's why the project was abandoned. Kale felt a chill run down his spine. If the Veil Syndicate intended to reactivate the protocol, they weren't just seeking power, they were gambling with the fate of the galaxy. And judging by the evidence, they were close to success. "We need to find their base of operations," Kale said firmly. "Wherever they're working on this, it's our best chance to stop them." Threx, who had joined the mission alongside a small contingent of Zenari rebels, stepped forward. His iridescent wings shimmered faintly in the low light. "There is a facility near the edge of Council space, a black hole accretion disk. Few dare venture there, but rumors suggest it houses forbidden experiments." Kale nodded. "That has to be it." Preparations began immediately. Using cloaking technology provided by the Orcs, the Eclipse set a course for the mysterious facility. Along the way, tensions ran high. Everyone knew the risks. Failure meant not only their deaths, but potentially the end of galactic civilization as they knew it. As they approached the black hole, its immense gravitational pull distorted space itself. Streams of glowing matter spiraled toward the event horizon, creating a dazzling yet terrifying sight. Hidden within this cosmic maelstrom lay the Syndicate's stronghold, an ominous structure clinging precariously to the edge of oblivion. "This is insane," muttered Captain Riatores, gripping the controls tightly as the ship navigated the treacherous environment. "One wrong move, and we're toast." But Kale remained resolute. "We've come too far to turn back now." When they finally reached the facility, it loomed before them like a fortress carved from darkness. Its jagged spires pulsed with eerie energy, hinting at the horrors contained within. As the team prepared to infiltrate, Kale addressed them one last time. "We're here because no one else can do this," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of their mission. "Whatever happens inside, remember why we're fighting. For freedom, for truth, and for survival." With those words, they donned their gear and boarded the shuttlecraft, ready to face whatever awaited them in the abyss. Kale glanced at Layla, Threx, and the others, each carrying their own fears and hopes. Together, they descended into the heart of the enemy's lair, knowing that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The shuttlecraft descended silently toward the shadowy facility, its cloaking device masking their approach. As they neared the jagged structure clinging to the edge of the black hole's accretion disk, the team felt an unsettling mix of awe and dread. The facility pulsed with unnatural energy, its spires glowing faintly against the swirling chaos of light and darkness around it. It looked less like a scientific outpost and more like a fortress built by madness. Kale led the team through the airlock after landing in a hidden bay on the facility's outer rim. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn but silenced, their footsteps muffled by the metallic corridors. The air inside was cold and sterile, carrying a faint hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Every step felt heavier, as if the oppressive gravity of the nearby black hole seeped into the walls themselves. "This place gives me chills," whispered Captain Riatores, her voice barely audible over the hum. Her eyes darted nervously at every corner, expecting ambushes or traps. "It's supposed to," Layla replied grimly. "This is where the Council hid its darkest secrets." They soon reached a large chamber filled with rows of suspended animation pods. Inside each pod floated humanoid figures, beings altered beyond recognition. Their bodies shimmered with strange, bioluminescent patterns, and their faces were frozen in expressions of agony or terror. Tubes connected them to machines that pulsed rhythmically, feeding data into a central neural network. What? What is this? Jonas Vale murmured, his face pale as he examined one of the pods. It's like they're being turned into something else. Leela scanned the nearest pod with her handheld device. These people, they're test subjects. The Genesis protocol isn't just theoretical anymore. The Syndicate has already started merging consciousnesses. Threx stepped closer, his massive frame casting long shadows across the room. And these are only the failures. Imagine what happens when they succeed. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, bathing the chamber in an ominous glow. A mechanical voice echoed through the corridors. Intruder alert. Security teams mobilized. They know we're here, Kale shouted. Move. The team sprinted deeper into the facility, dodging automated turrets and security drones that emerged from hidden alcoves. Despite the chaos, Kale kept his focus sharp. He knew they couldn't leave without finding definitive proof of the Syndicate's plans and stopping whatever experiment was underway. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast, cavernous space dominated by a massive orb floating in midair. Streams of energy coursed through it, connecting it to countless terminals and servers lining the walls. In the center stood Counselor Serene, flanked by armed enforcers and technicians monitoring the system. Armitage, Serene said coolly, her silver scales glinting under the harsh lights. I wondered how long it would take you to find us. You've crossed a line, Kale growled, raising his weapon. You're playing God with lives, not just humans, but every species out there. Serene smirked. You wouldn't understand. This is the future, a unified galaxy free of conflict. Sacrifices must be made. No, Leela interjected, stepping forward. This isn't unity, it's enslavement. Whatever you create will destroy everything. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Serene gestured to her enforcers. Enough talk. Eliminate them. A fierce firefight erupted. The team fought valiantly, using cover and teamwork to survive. Threx shielded Leela as she hacked into a terminal, attempting to disable the core. Jonas rigged explosives to buy them time while Rhea provided covering fire. When the dust settled, the team regrouped near the core. Threx had been injured protecting Leela, but he waved off help. Finish this, he rasped. Now. With seconds to spare, Leela triggered the shutdown sequence. The orb flickered, then exploded in a burst of light, severing the neural connections. Cheers erupted among the team, but their victory was short-lived. As they fled the collapsing facility, Kale glanced back at the crumbling structure. For now, the Genesis protocol was stopped, but he knew the fight wasn't over. The Syndicate wouldn't give up so easily. The shuttlecraft rocketed away from the crumbling facility, its engines straining against the immense gravitational pull of the black hole. Inside, the team sat in tense silence, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The core chamber's destruction had been a close call, too close. Sparks flew from damaged consoles as Jonas worked frantically to stabilize the ship's systems, while Captain Rhea Torres navigated the treacherous debris field left behind by the collapsing structure. Kale leaned back in his seat, clutching a deep gash on his arm, where shrapnel had grazed him during the escape. His mind replayed the confrontation with Counselor Serene, the cold certainty in her eyes, the chilling justification for her actions. She hadn't seen herself as a villain. She truly believed the Genesis protocol was the galaxy's salvation. That realization unsettled him more than anything else. We did it, Leela said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice carried both relief and exhaustion. The protocol is gone. For now, Kale replied grimly. He turned to face her, his expression hardening. But this isn't over. Serene wasn't acting alone. The Syndicate has roots deeper than we thought. Threx, seated nearby with makeshift bandages covering his wounds, nodded slowly. She spoke of sacrifices, as if the ends justified the means. This ideology infects more than one council member. Destroying that facility won't stop them all. Leela frowned, scrolling through data on her tablet. And there's something else. Before the core exploded, I downloaded fragments of logs from the system. They mentioned other locations tied to the protocol. Facilities spread across Council space. Cal's jaw tightened. So even if we destroyed their main hub, they can rebuild elsewhere. Exactly, Leela confirmed. We've slowed them down, but not stopped them. As the shuttle breached the accretion disk's outer edge and entered safer space, the weight of their next steps settled heavily on everyone. Humanity, and the galaxy, was still in danger. The team knew they couldn't fight this battle alone. They needed allies, resources, and a plan bold enough to dismantle the Syndicate entirely. Back aboard the Eclipse, Cal called an emergency meeting with the entire crew and their newfound allies. Holographic projections filled the briefing room, showing maps of suspected facilities and profiles of key Syndicate members. Each piece of information painted a clearer picture of the enemy, but also highlighted how outmatched humanity truly was. We have two options, Cal began, pacing in front of the group. We retreat, regroup, and hope the Syndicate doesn't retaliate. Or we strike first, expose their crimes to the galaxy and rally others to our side. Captain Torres crossed her arms. Exposing them sounds good, but do we have proof strong enough to convince neutral parties? Half the Council already hates us. We do now, Leela interjected, holding up her tablet. The logs I recovered contain direct references to Council leaders involved in the Syndicate. If we broadcast this information, it'll spark chaos, Jonas finished, rubbing his temples. Some species will side with us, sure, but others might see it as an act of war. Threx stood, his towering frame casting a shadow over the room. War may be inevitable. The question is whether we lead or follow. Cal nodded, his resolve hardening. Then we prepare for both. Leela, work on decrypting those logs fully. We need undeniable evidence. Jonas, reinforce the Eclipse. We're going to need every advantage. Rhea, plot courses to safe zones where we can gather support without risking ambush. What about you? Leela asked quietly. Cal met her gaze. I'm going to send a message, to Earth, to the Council, to everyone. Humanity refuses to bow to tyranny. And if the galaxy wants to stand with us, they'll know where to find us. As the meeting dispersed, Cal retreated to his quarters. Alone, he stared at the stars streaking past the viewport. The road ahead was fraught with danger, betrayal, and sacrifice. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one truth remained clear. Humanity would not back down. Not now. Not ever. For the first time in days, Cal allowed himself a small smile. The fight was far from over, but neither was humanity's spirit. Cal's message echoed across the galaxy like a thunderclap. Broadcast on every frequency, it reached council chambers, distant colonies, and even the most remote outposts. The transmission was simple yet powerful, a stark declaration of humanity's refusal to submit to corruption and tyranny. Accompanying the speech were fragments of the decrypted logs exposing the Veil Syndicate's crimes. Names, locations, and evidence laid bare for all to see. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Council chambers erupted into pandemonium as delegates turned on one another, accusing and defending in equal measure. Some species, horrified by the revelations, began withdrawing their support from the Council altogether. Others doubled down, dismissing the evidence as human propaganda. But amidst the chaos, a new movement began to take shape, a coalition of oppressed species and disillusioned council members who saw an opportunity to fight back against centuries of inequality and manipulation. On Earth, Cal's words ignited a firestorm of debate. While some senators called for restraint, fearing retaliation, others rallied behind him, declaring that humanity had finally taken a stand. Across the planet, protests erupted outside government buildings, with citizens chanting slogans like, "No more silence," and "For freedom." For the first time in years, humanity felt united, not just as nations or factions, but as a single people determined to protect their future. But unity came at a cost. Within hours of the broadcast, Council fleets mobilized, blockading human-controlled systems and severing trade routes. Sanctions were imposed, cutting off vital resources. Colony worlds braced for attack as warships loomed ominously on the edges of their territories. The Syndicate wasn't going to let humanity, or its allies, challenge their power without consequence. Despite the mounting pressure, Kale pressed forward. With Leela's help, he established communication channels with rebel factions across the galaxy. Species long silenced by the Council stepped forward, pledging support. Among them were the insectoid Zenari, the aquatic Vailith, and even rogue factions of the Orcs, who brought invaluable knowledge and salvage technology to the cause. Together, they formed the Galactic Resistance, a patchwork alliance united not by shared ideals, but by a common enemy. Back aboard the Eclipse, preparations for battle intensified. Jonas worked around the clock reinforcing the ship's weapon systems, while Rhea plotted daring supply runs through enemy blockades. Frex coordinated with his network of rebels, gathering intelligence on Council movements. Meanwhile, Leela analyzed intercepted transmissions, uncovering plans for a massive counterattack aimed squarely at Earth itself. "They're coming," she told Cal one evening, her voice tight with urgency. "A full-scale assault led by Serene and her enforcers. They mean to crush us before we gain more momentum." Cal nodded grimly. "Then we'll make sure they regret underestimating us." He called an emergency strategy meeting, laying out a bold plan. Rather than wait for the Council's fleet to reach Earth, they would strike preemptively, targeting key blockade points and drawing attention away from the planet. It was risky, but necessary. If successful, it would buy humanity time to fortify its defenses and rally additional allies. As the team prepared for what lay ahead, Kale took a moment to address them personally. Standing in the dimly lit briefing room, surrounded by faces weary yet resolute, he spoke from the heart. "This isn't just about survival anymore," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "It's about proving that no one, not the Council, not the Syndicate, can dictate our fate. Whatever happens next, know this: history will remember us not as victims, but as fighters, as survivors." His words hung in the air, igniting a spark of determination in everyone present. Though fear lingered, so did hope, the kind born of defiance and unity. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. Together, they would face the storm head-on. And when the Council's fleet arrived, Earth stood ready, not cowering, but defiant. The stage was set for the final battle, a clash that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The final battle unfolded above Earth's atmosphere, a dazzling display of light and destruction that painted the sky in hues of fire and shadow. Fleets clashed in chaotic formations, their ships exchanging volleys of energy blasts and missiles. Humanity's forces fought alongside their newfound allies, the Zenari, Vailith, rogue Orcs, and countless others who had joined the Galactic Resistance. Together, they formed a united front against the overwhelming might of the Council's armada. Kale stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, now retrofitted into a formidable flagship named Aegis Horizon. Around him, the crew worked tirelessly, coordinating attacks and monitoring enemy movements. Captain Rhea Torres piloted the vessel with precision, weaving through the chaos as explosions lit up the void. Leela relayed real-time data to allied ships, her voice calm but urgent over the comms. Jonas ensured the ship's systems held steady, his hands flying across consoles to repair damage caused by relentless assaults. At the center of it all, Kale commanded the Resistance fleet, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Focus fire on their command ships. We can't let them regroup." The Council's forces were disciplined and powerful, but they lacked one crucial element: unity. Many species within their ranks harbored doubts about the Syndicate's motives, and cracks began to show as the battle raged on. Some ships broke formation entirely, turning their weapons on enforcers loyal to Serene. The rebellion sparked by Cal's broadcast had spread even to the Council's own troops. Amidst the chaos, Cal led a daring assault on the Council's central hub, a massive dreadnought commanded by Serene herself. With Threx and a small strike team, he boarded the ship using stolen cloaking technology. Inside, they faced fierce resistance from elite enforcers, each encounter more brutal than the last. But Cal's determination never wavered. He knew this was where the fight would end, where the galaxy's future would be decided. Finally, they reached the command center. Serene awaited them, her silver scales gleaming under emergency lights. She stood tall, flanked by guards, her expression unreadable. "You've come far, Ambassador," she said coldly, "but you cannot win." "It's over, Serene," Cal replied, raising his weapon. "Your schemes have failed. Surrender, or face the consequences." Serene smirked, then activated a hidden failsafe. The room trembled as alarms blared. "If I fall, so does everything," she sneered. "This ship carries enough firepower to annihilate your precious Earth." Without hesitation, Cal turned to Threx. "Disable the failsafe," he ordered, charging at Serene. The two clashed in a fierce duel, trading blows until Cal gained the upper hand. With a final strike, he disarmed her, leaving her kneeling before him. Meanwhile, Threx and the team worked frantically to shut down the failsafe. Just as the countdown reached its final seconds, Threx slammed his fist onto the control panel, severing the connection. The alarm ceased, and the dreadnought powered down, drifting lifelessly in space. With their flagship disabled, the Council's remaining forces surrendered. The battle was won, but the war for trust and cooperation had only just begun. In the aftermath, Cal addressed the galaxy, proposing a reformed council built on transparency, equality, and mutual respect. Though scars remained, hope emerged as disparate species came together to forge a brighter future. As Cal looked out at the stars, he reflected on the cost of victory and the boundless potential of a united galaxy. Humanity's defiance hadn't been an act of arrogance, it had been a declaration of independence. And now, standing alongside allies old and new, Cal knew they had taken the first step toward true unity.